The lighter was worth more than money. That is the first thing you need to understand. It was a 1948 Zippo Silver Heavy, engraved with a winged skull on one side and the words Brothers Forever on the other. It had been carried through Korean winters and California summers, through bar fights and funerals, through the birth of a son and the death of a wife. It had lit cigarettes for dying men and celebratory cigars for new fathers. It had been held by hands that built an empire of chrome and leather and loyalty that stretched from Sacramento to the Oregon border. And on a Tuesday night in October, in a small town diner in Northern California, a 25-year-old man in a $1,000 suit threw it out a window like it was garbage. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you about the girl first. Cora Ryder was 22 years old, 5'4", with blonde hair. She kept pulled back in a messy ponytail and blue eyes that had learned a long time ago not to look directly at anyone. She was beautiful in the way that small town waitresses sometimes are the kind of beauty that gets noticed, but never rewarded the kind that draws attention from exactly the wrong people. She worked at Miller's Diner on Main Street in Redwood Valley, California. 6 days a week, 10-hour shifts, $4.15 an hour plus tips. The tips were the lifeline. Without them, she could not afford the medication her grandfather needed, could not keep the lights on in the old farmhouse at the end of Crabtree Road, could not buy groceries or gas or the 100 small things that separated survival from surrender. She had been working at Miller's for 2 years. 730 days of carrying plates and refilling coffee cups and smiling at people who looked through her like she was made of glass. 730 days of sore feet and aching shoulders and the bone-deep tiredness of smiling at people who treat you like furniture. But Cora did not complain. She had learned that lesson early. Complaining required someone to listen, and the only person who listened to Cora Ryder was her grandfather, and she would rather die than add her burdens to his. Walter Ghost Rider was 73 years old, and he was the most dangerous man most people in Redwood Valley had ever seen. Not because he was violent, though he had been in his younger days. Not because he was loud, though his voice could silence a room full of drunk bikers with a single word. He was dangerous because he was patient, because he remembered everything, because he had spent 50 years building a network of loyalty and obligation that stretched across 3 states, and because when someone hurt the people he loved, he did not forgive and he did not forget. He had founded the Phantom Riders Motorcycle Club in 1955 when he was barely 22 himself. A young man with nothing to lose and everything to prove, building a brotherhood from scratch in the dusty valleys of Northern California. For 30 years, the Phantom Riders had controlled trucking routes, union contracts, construction permits, and the kind of quiet power that never made the newspapers, but shaped everything behind the scenes. Then, in the 90s, Ghost had gone legitimate, opened a custom motorcycle shop on the outskirts of town, kept his head down, paid his taxes, became the kind of old man that neighbors waved to without knowing what he had been. But the connections remained. The phone number still worked. The favors were still owed. And every biker from Sacramento to Portland still knew that when Ghost Rider called, you answered. No questions. No hesitation. You got on your bike and you rode. Cora was his only family. His son, her father, had died in a car accident 4 years ago, along with her mother. A drunk driver on Highway 101 at 11:30 on a Saturday night. 2 lives erased in the time it takes to blink. Cora had been 18, a freshman at the community college, with dreams of becoming a nurse. She dropped out the next week, moved in with Ghost, started waitressing to pay bills that her father's meager life insurance could not cover. For the first 2 years, she grieved, moved through the world like a sleepwalker going through the motions of living without actually being alive. She cleaned the house, cooked meals, drove Ghost to his doctor appointments when his knees got too bad for the motorcycle. She existed, but she did not live. Then she started working at Miller's and something shifted. Not better exactly, but different. The routine gave her structure. The work gave her purpose. The tips, meager as they were, gave her a reason to get up each morning. She was surviving, which, in Cora Ryder's world, counted as a victory. The diner itself was nothing special. Formica countertops, vinyl booths repaired with duct tape, a jukebox in the corner that only played country songs from the 80s. Marcus Ford owned the place, a big man with a soft voice who had inherited it from his father and ran it the way his father had, which meant the coffee was always fresh, the pie was always homemade, and the prices had not changed in 15 years. Marcus was not a bad man. That is important to understand. He was not cruel or heartless or indifferent to suffering. He was simply afraid, and fear makes cowards of us all. The fear had a name: Logan Mercer. Logan Mercer was 25 years old, 6'2", built like a quarterback who had traded his jersey for Italian suits. He had his father's jawline, his mother's green eyes, and a smile that could charm a rattlesnake or cut you to the bone depending on his mood. He managed the real estate division of Mercer Construction, which meant he spent his days buying properties, raising rents, and squeezing every last dollar out of the working people of Redwood Valley. His father, Richard Mercer, was worth $300 million. He sat on the town council, owned half the commercial real estate in the county, and had the kind of power that came not from muscle or threats, but from signatures on contracts and phone calls to judges. Richard operated from San Francisco, leaving Logan to run things locally with the casual cruelty of a prince ruling a kingdom he had not earned. Logan came to Miller's Diner 3 or 4 times a week, always with his entourage. Tyler Briggs, his right hand, a former college linebacker with a trust fund and a mean streak. Ashley Dixon, Logan's girlfriend, platinum blonde, with perfect nails and a voice like honey poured over broken glass. And usually 2 or 3 others, interchangeable rich kids who laughed at Logan's jokes and looked at their phones and never once considered the humanity of the woman refilling their water glasses. The first time Logan noticed Cora, really noticed her, was about 18 months ago. She had been carrying a tray of drinks to a corner booth when she stumbled over a bag that Tyler had deliberately left in the aisle. The glasses shattered. Coffee and ice water splashed across the floor. Cora dropped to her knees, immediately picking up broken glass with her bare hands, apologizing to everyone within earshot, even though it was not her fault. Logan watched her from his booth, that particular smile spreading across his face. The smile of a predator who has just spotted something interesting. From that moment on, Cora Ryder became Logan Mercer's favorite entertainment. It started small. A comment about her uniform, about the way her apron strings hung crooked, about the chip in her front tooth that she had never been able to afford to fix. Small cruelties designed to remind her of her place, to establish that she was beneath him in every way that mattered. Then it escalated. Logan began requesting that Cora serve his table exclusively. If Marcus tried to assign another waitress, Logan would make a phone call, and within the hour, Marcus would receive a notice about a building inspection or a lease review or some other bureaucratic threat that reminded him who owned the walls around him. So Cora served Logan's table. Every time, no exceptions. The tips became a game. Logan would leave a $20 bill on the table, wait for Cora to reach for it, then snatch it back with a laugh. Sometimes he would drop coins on the floor, one at a time, watching her bend down to pick them up while his friends snickered. Once he left a $50 bill tucked under a plate of half-eaten food, and when Cora reached for it, he grabbed her wrist and held it just long enough for the message to be clear. You take what I give you. Nothing more. Cora endured it. She endured it the way she endured everything, with silence and downcast eyes and the stillness of someone who has learned that resistance only makes things worse. She needed the job. Ghost needed his medication. The electricity bill was due in 9 days. These were the calculations that ran through her mind every time Logan Mercer opened his mouth. She never told her grandfather. That was the rule she had made for herself on the very first day Logan started his games. Ghost was 73 years old with a bad heart and worse knees. He had spent his whole life fighting battles, and Cora could not bear the thought of adding another one. So she swallowed the humiliation the way she swallowed everything else whole without chewing and tried not to choke on it. But humiliation has a way of accumulating. It builds up like sediment in a river, layer upon layer, until the water runs dark and the current changes direction. And on that Tuesday night in October, the river finally broke its banks. The evening had started badly. Ghost had a doctor's appointment that morning, and the news was not good. His heart was weakening, the doctor said. Not an emergency, not yet, but a trend line that pointed in only one direction. He needed to rest, more stress, less, take his medication consistently. The medication that cost $400 a month after insurance. The insurance that barely covered anything at all. Cora had sat in the parking lot of the medical center for 15 minutes after the appointment, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went white doing the math in her head. $400 for medication, $600 for the mortgage, $200 for utilities, $150 for groceries, $40 for gas. The numbers did not add up. They never added up. She drove Ghost home, made him lunch, made sure he took his pills, then drove to the diner for her evening shift. She was 20 minutes early because she always was. Early meant she could check her section restock. The condiments make sure everything was perfect before the dinner rush. Perfection was her armor. If she was perfect, no one could complain. If no one complained, she kept her job. If she kept her job, Ghost got his medication. Simple math. Cruel math, but the only math that mattered. The dinner rush hit at 6:15. By 7:00, every booth was full. Cora moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her smile fixed in place like a mask, her feet screaming inside shoes that were 6 months past their expiration date. Logan arrived at 7:30. He pushed through the front door with Tyler and Ashley flanking him. His voice already too loud, his laugh already too sharp. He had been drinking. Cora could tell by the way his eyes moved slow and heavy, like a lizard tracking a fly. The usual booth? Cora's section. Of course. She took a breath. Just a small one, barely a sip of air, but enough to steady herself. Then she picked up 3 menus and walked over. Good evening! Can I start you off with some drinks? Her voice was steady, It was always steady. That was the one thing they could not take from her, the one small victory she allowed herself every night. No matter what they said, no matter what they did, her voice did not shake. Logan looked up at her, and something in his expression was different tonight. Meaner, more focused. Like he had come here with a purpose beyond his usual entertainment. Cora, he said, drawing out her name like it was a joke, only he understood. My favorite waitress. You know what I think tonight is special? What do you think, Tyler? Is tonight special? Tyler grinned. Real special. Ashley studied her nails, bored or pretending to be. Cora stood with her pen poised over her order pad, waiting. She had learned that engaging with Logan's provocations only prolonged them. Silence was faster. Silence got her back to the kitchen sooner, away from his eyes, away from his voice, away from everything. 3 whiskeys, Logan said. Top shelf. And whatever pie you have back there. He leaned back in the booth, his arm stretched across the back of the seat. Actually, bring the whole pie. I am in a generous mood. Cora wrote it down and turned to leave. Wait. Logan's voice stopped her. What is that in your pocket? Cora's hand moved instinctively to her apron, to the small, hard shape pressing against her hip. The lighter. She carried it every shift, every day, the way some people carried prayer beads or photographs. It was her talisman, her connection to her grandfather, to her father, to a family history that stretched back decades. Nothing, she said quietly. Just a lighter, just a lighter. Logan's eyebrows rose. Let me see it. It is personal. I said, let me see it. The diner had gone quiet. Not silent exactly, but the volume had dropped the way it does when people sense something about to happen. Conversations trailed off. Forks paused midway to mouths. Eyes shifted without heads turning. Marcus stood behind the counter, his hands gripping the edge, his face tight, with the expression of a man watching a car crash he cannot stop. Cora knew she had 2 choices. Give Logan the lighter and watch him mock it, or refuse and watch him make a phone call that would cost Marcus his lease and Cora her job. Neither option was good, but one option let her keep the lighter. She reached into her apron and pulled it out. The Zippo caught the fluorescent light, its silver surface glowing warm against Cora's small hand. The engraving was worn, but still legible. The skull with its spread wings on one side, the date and the motto on the other, all of it smoothed by decades of being held and carried and passed from hand to hand. Logan took it from her. Not roughly, not with violence, but with the casual authority of someone who believed everything in the world was his for the taking. He turned it over in his hands, examining it with exaggerated interest. Well, 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 what do we have here? 1948. Brothers forever. He looked up at Cora with that smile, the one that never reached his eyes. This is Granddaddy's, is it not? The old biker. The scary man with the leather jacket and the reputation. Tyler leaned in for a look. That thing is ancient. It is a family heirloom, Cora said, and her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. A hairline fracture in her armor. Please, give it back. Please. Logan held the lighter up so the whole diner could see. Did everyone hear that? She said, please. The biker princess said, please. Ashley looked up from her nails, a thin smile crossing her lips. That is so sad. How old is that thing? Like 100 years. It belonged to my grandfather. Cora said again, and she hated the pleading in her voice, hated the way her hands were trembling, hated everything about this moment. It is the only thing of value my family has. Please, Logan, I am begging you, give it back. She should not have said those words. She knew it the moment they left her mouth. Begging was blood in the water. Begging was an invitation. Logan stood up slowly, the lighter held high above his head, well out of Cora's reach. He was a foot taller than her and 80 pounds heavier, and he used every inch of that advantage. You want it back, his voice carried across the entire diner. Get on your knees and ask me nicely. The silence that followed was absolute. 30 people in that diner, customers and staff, and not a single one of them made a sound. They sat in their booths and stood behind the counter and stared at their plates and their hands and anything that was not the young woman being humiliated in front of them. Marcus Ford closed his eyes. His hands shook against the counter. He did not move. Cora stood perfectly still. Something was happening inside her. Something chemical. Something that felt like a door being opened in a room she had kept locked for a very long time. Behind that door was every swallowed insult, every forced smile. Every night she had cried in her truck in the parking lot. Before driving home to pretend everything was fine, she did not get on her knees. She reached for the lighter instead, her hand stretching up toward Logan's fist, and he laughed and pulled it higher, and Tyler stepped in behind her, blocking her path. And, for a moment, Cora was trapped between two large men in a diner full of people who would not help her. Come on, biker princess. Logan's voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and cruel. You want Granddaddy's little treasure? Then beg for it. Or I throw it right out that window into the drainage ditch behind this building. Your choice. Cora looked at the lighter in Logan's hand, the silver catching the light. That lighter had been in her grandfather's pocket when he buried his wife. It had been in her father's jacket when he held Cora for the first time in the hospital. It was 60 years of love and loss and loyalty, compressed into 5 ounces of metal and memory. Please, she whispered, do not do this. It is all I have left. Logan held her gaze for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been hesitation or might have been pleasure at seeing her so completely broken. Then, he turned toward the window, cocked his arm back, and threw the lighter as hard as he could. The silver Zippo sailed through the open window above the dishwasher station, spinning end over end, catching the last light of the October sun before it disappeared into the darkness beyond. Cora heard it hit something, a dull metallic sound, swallowed by distance, and then nothing. Gone. Into the drainage ditch that ran behind the diner, a 15-foot trench of mud and trash and standing water that the city had been promising to clean for 3 years. Cora made a sound. Not a scream. Something quieter and more terrible than a scream. A sound that came from somewhere below. Language below thought, from the place where grief lives before it has words. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself on the edge of the booth, her fingernails digging into the vinyl. Logan sat back down, picked up his menu, and smiled. Now then, about that pie. Tyler laughed. Ashley inspected her nails. The diner remained frozen. 30 people who had watched a young woman be destroyed and done absolutely nothing. Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Cora, at the shattered expression on her face, at the tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Then he looked at Logan, at the casual cruelty sitting in that booth like it owned the place. Which technically it did. And Marcus made a choice. It was the wrong choice, but it was the only choice he knew how to make. Cora, his voice was rough. I need to talk to you in the kitchen. Now. She followed him on autopilot, her body moving without her permission. The kitchen was hot and loud, the dishwasher running the line, cook flipping burgers, the smell of grease and coffee thick enough to taste. Marcus could not look at her. He stared at the floor, at the grease stains on the tile, at his own worn out shoes. I have got to let you go. The words hit Cora like a physical blow. She took a step backward, her hip catching the edge of the prep counter. What? Marcus, I am so sorry. But he called his father last week. Told Richard I was creating a hostile environment for customers. Richard sent me a letter about my lease. If I do not fix the problem, they are going to triple my rent in January. I am the problem. It was not a question. Cora said it flatly, without emotion, because she had used up all her emotions in the last 5 minutes. You are a good worker, Cora. The best I have ever had. And what they are doing to you is wrong. I know it is wrong. But if I lose this lease, I lose everything. My father built this diner. I cannot let it die because Marcus's voice broke. I am sorry. I am a coward, and I am sorry. Cora untied her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. She took off her name tag, the one that said Cora in faded letters, and set it on top of the apron. My last paycheck. I will mail it. End of the week. And your tips from tonight, let me get the cash from the register. Keep it. Cora walked out the back door of the kitchen into the alley behind the diner. The October air hit her like cold water. She stood in the darkness staring at the drainage ditch where her grandfather's lighter had disappeared. She could see the trench from here. 15 feet deep, steep-sided, choked with weeds and garbage. Somewhere in that mess, buried in mud and standing water, the last piece of her family was rusting. For a long moment, Cora considered climbing down, but the sides were slick with rain and the bottom was invisible in the darkness. And if she fell and broke her leg down, there nobody would come looking. Ghost would sit at home waiting and nobody would call, and he would find out about all of it, about Logan and the lighter and the job, and his weak heart would finally give out. So she did not climb down. Instead, she pulled out her phone. An ancient flip phone, prepaid, the cheapest model the store had. She opened it and stared at the screen. One number in the contacts, just one. She pressed call. 3 rings. 4. 5. Yeah. The voice on the other end was rough as gravel, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. The voice of a man who had lived 73 years and remembered every single one of them. Grandpa? Cora's voice shattered on the word. It just broke apart, all the pieces she had been holding together for 2 years, finally coming undone. Grandpa. I need help. Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. Listening silence. The kind of silence that comes before storms. What happened, baby girl? They took your lighter, Logan Mercer. He took it from me and he threw it in the drainage ditch behind the diner. And then Marcus fired me because Logan threatened to take his lease, and I tried to stop it, Grandpa. I tried, but he was too strong and nobody helped, and I could not. Cora. Ghost's voice cut through the spiral like a blade through water. One word. Her name. Spoken with the kind of authority that made generals and governors and grown men twice his size Stop talking and listen. Breathe. Tell me everything from the beginning. So Cora told him. Standing in the alley behind a diner that was no longer her workplace, shivering in the October cold, she told her grandfather everything. Not just about tonight, about all of it. The 18 months of humiliation. The tips snatched from her fingers. The comments about her body and her clothes and her broken tooth. The way Logan grabbed her wrist. The way Marcus looked away. The way 30 people sat in that diner every night and watched a young woman be destroyed and never once stood up. She told him about the sleepless nights and the crying in her truck and the fear that coiled in her stomach every time she saw a black Mercedes pull into the parking lot. She told him about the calculations that ran through her head constantly, the desperate math of poverty, weighing dignity against survival, and choosing survival every single time. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Long silence. Terrible silence. Then, Ghost spoke, and his voice was different. Colder. Flatter. Stripped of everything except purpose. What is the boy's full name? Logan Mercer. His father is Richard Mercer. They own Mercer Construction. They own half the town, Grandpa. They own the building the diner is in. They own. I do not care if they own the whole damn state. Each word came out precise and measured like bullets being loaded into a chamber one at a time. You stay right where you are, baby girl. Do not go back inside that diner. Do not talk to anyone. Stand by the back door and wait. But, Grandpa, you cannot. Your heart, the doctor said. My heart is fine. My heart has been beating for 73 years, and it will beat for 73 more if it knows what is good for it. Now, you listen to me, Cora. That lighter has been in our family since before you were born. It was in my pocket when I married your grandmother. It was in your father's jacket the day you were born. It carried your grandmother's picture through every mile I ever rode, and your father's first drawing through every storm I ever weathered. Ghost's voice did not rise. It did not need to. Every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. That lighter is our family's heart, baby girl. And nobody takes our heart and walks away. The line went dead. Cora stood in the alley, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not hope, exactly. Something harder than hope. Something with teeth. She walked around to the front of the diner and sat down on the curb under the streetlight. The October wind cut through her thin uniform, but she barely felt it. She was too busy listening. At first, there was nothing, just the sounds of a small town at night, cars passing, a dog barking somewhere, the muffled noise of the diner behind her, people eating and laughing and living their lives as if nothing had happened. Then she heard it. It started low, almost below the threshold of hearing. A vibration more than a sound, the kind of thing you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. Like thunder, but steadier. Like a heartbeat, but louder. Growing, multiplying, becoming something else entirely. Cora stood up. From the north, a line of headlights appeared on the highway. Single lights spaced evenly moving in perfect formation. Then, more from the east and the west. Converging on Redwood Valley from every direction like rivers flowing toward a single point. The sound grew until it filled the night sky, until the streetlights trembled and the windows of the diner rattled in their frames. Inside, conversations died. Forks stopped. heads turned toward the windows. They came in waves, 10 bikes, then 20, then 30. Harley Davidsons, mostly big touring bikes, and stripped down road machines, their engines thundering in synchronization. The riders dismounted with military precision, parking their motorcycles in neat rows that surrounded the diner and the 3 blocks around it. They wore leather. They wore patches. They wore the kind of expressions that made police officers reconsider their career choices. Men and women, ranging from their 20s to their 70s, all of them carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of people who had seen the worst the world had to offer and decided to keep going anyway. Inside the diner, Logan Mercer stood up from his booth and walked to the window. The color drained from his face the way water drains from a bathtub quickly and completely. "What the hell?" Tyler said, pressing his face against the glass. "What the actual hell?" Ashley grabbed Logan's arm. "Who are they?" "Logan, who are those people?" But Logan did not answer because he was watching a black pickup truck pull up to the curb, driven by a biker half his age. And, climbing out of the passenger side, moving slowly, but with the kind of deliberation that made every step look like a promise, was an old man who looked like he had been carved from the same granite as the mountains beyond the valley. Ghost Rider was 73 years old. His white hair was pulled back in a ponytail that reached halfway down his back. His leather cut was immaculate, the patches telling stories in a language that most people could not read. President. Original member. 1955. Road captain. And, across the back, in letters 2 inches high, the name of a brotherhood that had shaped Northern California for 3 generations. He moved slower than he used to. His left hand trembled slightly, a detail that only someone who loved him would notice. But his blue eyes were clear and sharp and absolutely merciless as they swept across the diner, across the faces pressed against the glass, across the whole frightened town that had allowed his granddaughter to suffer. Cora ran to him. She threw her arms around his neck and buried her face in his leather jacket. And, for a moment, the most dangerous man in 3 counties was just a grandfather holding his granddaughter in a parking lot. His scarred hand stroking her hair, his voice whispering words too soft for anyone else to hear. Then he straightened. He looked at the diner. He looked at the 200 bikers standing silent behind him, their engines cooling their faces, patient and hard. And Ghost Rider spoke. His voice was not loud. He did not shout. He did not need to. In the absolute silence of that October night, with 200 motorcycles cooling around him, and an entire town holding its breath, every single word carried like a bell ringing in an empty church. "I want Logan Mercer brought out here. I want his father called. And I want every person who sat in that diner and watched my granddaughter beg on her knees and did nothing. I want them to come outside and look me in the eye." Inside Miller's diner, Logan Mercer's legs gave out. He sat down hard in the booth, his face the color of old snow. His hands were shaking so badly that his whiskey glass rattled against the table. Tyler backed away from the window. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was opening and closing without producing sound, like a fish pulled from water. Ashley grabbed her purse and headed for the back door. But a massive biker was already standing there, arms crossed, blocking the exit with nothing but his presence. Nobody was leaving. Nobody was leaving until Ghost Rider said they could. Logan pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and called the only person who had ever been able to fix his problems. Dad. His voice came out thin and reedy, stripped of every ounce of the confidence he had carried like a weapon for 25 years. Dad, you need to come to Redwood Valley right now. I am in San Francisco. Richard Mercer's voice was sharp with irritation. I am closing the Henderson deal. Whatever this is, it can wait. There are bikers here, 200 of them, and they are here because of me. The line went quiet. Logan could hear his father breathing, then muffled voices, his father speaking to someone about postponing a meeting that was worth $40 million. When Richard came back on the line, his tone had completely changed. What did you do? There is this waitress, Cora Ryder. I took something from her, her grandfather's lighter. I threw it away. And now her grandfather is here with what looks like every biker in California, and he is asking for me by name. Ryder. Richard's voice went sharp as a blade. Walter Ryder. Ghost Rider. Tell me you did not just say that name. You know him. Know him? The laugh that came through the phone was humorless and cold. Logan. That man built the infrastructure of Northern California. Every union contract, every trucking route, every construction permit that our company depends on runs through people who owe Walter Ryder their careers. He is the reason I never expanded south of Sacramento, not because of competition, because Ghost Rider told me not to, and I was smart enough to listen. Logan closed his eyes. His hand was shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped from his fingers. You idiot! Richard's voice was quiet now, which was worse than shouting. You complete and utter idiot. Do you have any idea what you have done to us? Dad, I am scared. You should be. I am an hour away, maybe less. Do not leave that building. Do not say a word to anyone. And pray to God that old man is willing to talk before he decides to do something else. The line went dead. Logan looked at Tyler, at Ashley, at the other customers frozen in their booths like figures in a wax museum. He looked at Marcus, standing behind the counter with his hands over his face. He looked at the window where the October darkness was now filled with chrome and leather and the quiet patience of 200 people who had dropped everything in their lives because one old man made one phone call. And Logan Mercer, for the first time in his 25 years on this earth, understood what it felt like to be completely and totally powerless. Outside, Ghost. Ryder waited. The army of motorcycles waited. Cora stood beside her grandfather, her hand resting on his arm, feeling the slight tremor in his muscles that he was trying so hard to hide. And somewhere in the drainage ditch behind Miller's Diner, buried in mud and darkness, a silver Zippo lighter waited to be found. The hunt had begun. The police arrived 7 minutes later. 2 patrol cars screaming into the block, with lights flashing sirens, cutting through the rumble of cooling engines. Officer Mike Daniels stepped out first, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before his brain caught up with his eyes and he understood the math. 2 officers, 200 bikers. He let his hand drop. His partner, Officer Jenny Gallagher, stood frozen by the passenger door. Her radio was crackling with dispatch, asking for updates, but she could not form words. She had been on the force for 12 years and had never seen anything like this. The entire block was motorcycles. Chrome and leather as far as the streetlights reached. Daniels approached Ghost slowly, his boots splashing through puddles left by the afternoon rain. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to run, if he needed to. Not that running would help. Sir, I am going to need you and your people to clear this area immediately. You are blocking a public roadway and creating a disturbance. Ghost turned his head slowly. His blue eyes locked onto Daniel's with the kind of stare that made grown men remember every lie they had ever told and every promise they had ever broken. Officer Daniels, your mother Helen lives on Birch Street, does she not? Sweet woman, makes the best apple pie in the county, brings it to the church potluck every third Sunday. Daniels went rigid. How do you know my mother? Because I make it my business to know things, son. Always have. And I know your mother raised you to protect people who cannot protect themselves. So let me ask you something. Where were you when my granddaughter was being terrorized in that diner? Night after night for 18 months. Where was this badge? Where was this uniform? Where was anyone? Daniels opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sir, that is a separate issue. Right now, Right now, you need to stand there and let me handle something your department failed to handle for a year and a half. Ghost's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. We are not armed. We are not threatening anyone. We are standing on a public street exercising our constitutional right to assembly. Last I checked, that is not illegal. Gallagher had moved closer, her hand still on her radio. Dispatch, we have approximately 150 motorcycles blocking the 200 block of Main Street. Situation is tense, but currently nonviolent. Requesting backup and a supervisor. 173 ghost corrected without looking at her. And we are expecting another 30 or so within the hour. Word travels fast when family gets hurt. Daniels looked at Gallagher. Gallagher looked at Daniels. Neither of them had any idea what to do because nothing in their training had prepared them for an elderly man who spoke softly, threatened no one, and had somehow summoned an army with a single phone call. Inside the diner, Logan Mercer sat in his booth with his head in his hands. Tyler paced by the window, running his fingers through his hair, peering through the blinds every few seconds, as if hoping the motorcycles might have disappeared. They had not. Ashley had retreated to the bathroom and was not coming out. Marcus stood behind the counter, wiping the same spot over and over, his rag moving in circles that matched the spiral of his thoughts. He had fired Cora. He had looked that girl in the eye and taken away her livelihood because a rich man's son told him to. And now, 200 bikers were outside his door, and the universe was presenting him with a bill he could not afford to pay. The other customers sat perfectly still. An elderly couple in the corner booth held hands across the table. A truck driver at the counter stared into his coffee like it contained the answers to questions he had not thought to ask. A young mother with two small children pulled them closer and whispered that everything was going to be fine, even though her voice said the opposite. Nobody tried to leave. The exits were not blocked, not physically. No biker stood in any doorway with crossed arms or threatening posture. But the weight of what was happening outside, the sheer presence of it, created a gravity that held everyone in place. 43 minutes after Ghost's phone call, a black Mercedes SUV pulled up to the police line that Daniels and Gallagher had established more as a gesture than a barrier. The door opened and Richard Mercer stepped out. He moved like a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Silver hair perfectly styled, Italian shoes that cost more than Cora made in a month. A suit cut so precisely it looked like architecture. But as he walked toward Ghost, threading through the rows of silent motorcycles, something in his posture shifted. The confidence did not disappear exactly, it recalibrated. The way a man recalibrates when he realizes the ground beneath him is not as solid as he thought. Mr. Ryder. Richard extended his hand. The gesture was automatic. Muscle memory from 10,000 business meetings where a handshake was the first move in a game he always won. I believe we need to discuss the situation like reasonable men. Ghost looked at the offered hand the way a man looks at something unpleasant on the bottom of his shoe. He did not take it. You can put that away. We are not friends, and we are not doing business. We are here because your son spent 18 months terrorizing my granddaughter, and tonight he crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Richard lowered his hand. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained smooth. I understand there was an incident involving some personal property. Whatever was taken, I am prepared to make it right. Name a number. I will write you a check right now. The laugh that came from Ghost was dry and humorless, the sound of a man who had been offered money by people who thought money solved everything and who had spent a lifetime proving them wrong. You think this is about money. You think you can sign a check and make 18 months of your son humiliating my girl disappear. You think dollars can buy back dignity. Then what do you want? Richard's voice hardened. Every man wants something. Name it and let us resolve this before it gets out of hand. Ghost took one step forward. Just one. A single step that covered maybe 18 inches of pavement. But Richard Mercer, a man worth $300 million, who had stared down senators and union bosses and federal prosecutors without flinching, stumbled backward like he had been shoved by an invisible hand. I want your son brought out here. Ghost's voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire block, across the rows of silent motorcycles, through the windows of the diner, into every ear within 100 yards. I want him to stand in front of my granddaughter and understand what he did. And then I want him to go into that drainage ditch and find what he threw away. Richard's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, calculation, outrage. You cannot be serious. That drainage ditch is 15 feet deep. It is full of mud and debris. You are asking my son to. I am asking your son to learn what it feels like to fight for something. To crawl through dirt for something that matters. Because that is what my granddaughter has been doing every single day for 2 years. Crawling through dirt to survive. And your son stood above her and laughed. Officer Daniels stepped between them, his hands raised. Gentlemen, let us all take a breath. Mr. Mercer, perhaps you should speak with your son inside. Mr. Ryder, I understand you are upset, but this show of force is only making the situation more. More what? Ghost's eyes swung to Daniels. More visible, more uncomfortable, more difficult for everyone to pretend nothing is wrong. That is exactly the point, officer. My granddaughter was invisible for 18 months. Tonight, she is not. A voice cut through the tension from the direction of the diner. Dad. Everyone turned. Logan Mercer stood in the doorway of Miller's Diner. The light behind him cast his shadow long across the wet pavement, stretching it thin like the courage he was trying to hold together. He looked smaller somehow, as if the last hour had physically reduced him. His expensive shirt was untucked, his hair disheveled, his eyes red. Richard moved toward his son immediately. Logan, get back inside. We are handling this. No. The word came from Ghost, spoken with the kind of finality that does not invite discussion. He stays right there. I want him to see this, to see what happens when you hurt someone who has people willing to stand for her. Logan's legs were trembling. He gripped the door frame for support, his knuckles white against the wood. See what? Richard's voice rose for the first time. You have made your point. You have scared an entire town. You have demonstrated that you can mobilize an army on a weeknight. Congratulations. But my son is 25 years old, and you are a 73-year-old man, and this is not a proportionate response to a stolen lighter. Proportionate. The word came out of Ghost like a blade being drawn from a sheath. Slow, deliberate, impossibly sharp. You want to talk to me about proportionate. Was it proportionate when your son snatched tips from a girl who makes $4 an hour? Was it proportionate when he grabbed her wrist in front of 30 witnesses? Was it proportionate when he made her beg on her knees for something that survived more years than he has been alive? Was it proportionate when he threw 60 years of my family's history into a drainage ditch like it was a candy wrapper? Ghost's voice had not risen, not once. And that was the most terrifying thing about it. Was it proportionate when Marcus Ford fired my granddaughter tonight because your son threatened to destroy his business? Was it proportionate that she lost her only source of income because a rich man's boy wanted to feel powerful? Tell me, Richard, where was your sense of proportion when your son was destroying a girl who never did a single thing to him? The parking lot was silent. 200 bikers, 2 police officers, a billionaire, a waitress, an old man, all of them frozen in a moment that felt like the hinge point of something much larger than a lighter thrown through a window. Logan spoke. His voice cracked on every other word, splintering like wood under too much weight. He is right, Dad. Richard turned to his son, his face rigid with controlled fury. Do not say another word. No, I have to say this. Logan stepped out of the doorway into the night, into the light of the street lamps, and the gaze of 200 strangers who had come from across the state because he had made a girl cry. He is right about everything. I did all of it. Everything he said. I did it because I could. Because nobody stopped me. Because she was there and she was easy. And it made me feel like I was something more than just my father's money. Logan. I am not talking to you, Dad. Logan looked at Ghost. His voice was shaking, but he did not stop. I am talking to him. And to her. He looked past Ghost to where Cora stood, half hidden behind her grandfather's shoulder, watching with those blue eyes that had spent 18 months learning not to look at anything directly. I am sorry, Cora. For everything. Ghost studied the young man for a long moment, his blue eyes moving across Logan's face, the way a mechanic studies an engine, looking for the broken parts, assessing what can be repaired and what needs to be replaced entirely. Sorry is noise, boy. Noise does not fix anything. Actions fix things. Then tell me what to do. Logan's voice broke on the word do cracking open to reveal something raw underneath. Whatever it is, I will do it. Just tell me. Ghost pointed toward the back of the diner, toward the darkness where the drainage ditch ran like an open wound behind the building. You know what I want. Get down in that ditch and find my lighter. By yourself. No help. No shortcuts. You crawl through that mud and you find what you threw away. Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp. Absolutely not. That ditch is a hazard. There could be broken glass, rusted metal, contaminated water. If my son gets hurt down there, then you will pay his medical bills the way rich people always do. Ghost did not even look at Richard. His eyes stayed on Logan. But the boy goes down there. He finds the lighter. He brings it back. And then we will see if his sorry means anything at all. The silence that followed lasted maybe 10 seconds. But 10 seconds of absolute silence in a crowd of 200 people feels like an eternity. It feels like the whole world holding its breath. Logan Mercer looked at his father. Richard's face was a battlefield fear, fighting fury, fighting calculation. The kind of rapid math that billionaires do when they realize their money has limits. Richard. Ghost spoke without looking at the older Mercer. I know about the union contracts. I know about the trucking routes. I know about the 3 inspectors who sign off on your permits every quarter. You know what happens if I make certain phone calls. That is blackmail. That is a father telling another father how the world works. Ghost's voice softened by exactly 1 degree. I am giving your boy a chance to fix what he broke. Most people do not get that chance. I suggest he take it. Richard closed his eyes. When he opened them, the fight had gone out of his body like air leaving a punctured tire. Logan, can you do this? Logan stared at his father. In that stare was everything a son feels when he realizes his father sees him not as a child to be protected, but as a problem to be managed. So I am just a liability to you. A business calculation. Richard's jaw tightened. You are my son, but you are also the person who created the situation. So yes, you are going to be the person who fixes it. Logan looked from his father to Ghost to Cora. His eyes lingered on Cora, on the tear track still visible on her cheeks, on the way she held herself like someone bracing for another blow. Fine. The word came out barely above a whisper. I will do it. Ghost nodded once. Officer Daniels. I want you and Officer Gallagher to accompany the boy to the edge of the ditch. Make sure he does not do anything foolish. Everyone else stays here. Cora stepped forward, her hand touching Ghost's arm. Grandpa, you do not have to. Yes, I do, baby girl. Ghost covered her hand with his. This is not about revenge. This is about teaching. There is a difference, and tonight that boy is going to learn it. The walk from the diner entrance to the drainage ditch behind the building was maybe 60 yards. Logan walked it alone, flanked at a distance by Daniels and Gallagher, threading through a corridor of silent bikers who watched him pass with expressions that ranged from contempt to pity to complete indifference. Students of suffering, all of them. Men and women who had crawled through their own ditches in their own ways and understood exactly what Ghost was doing. This was not cruelty. This was education. At the edge of the ditch, Logan looked down. The street light from the alley barely reached, casting weak yellow light across a slope of mud and weeds and accumulated garbage. Plastic bags, broken bottles, a shopping cart half submerged in standing water at the bottom. The smell was thick and organic rot, and stagnation, and the particular sourness of a place that had been forgotten by everyone responsible for maintaining it. You do not have to do this, Daniel said it quietly, just to Logan. We can figure out another way. But Logan knew there was no other way. His father's face had made that clear. The 200 bikers had made that clear. And somewhere deeper than calculation, deeper than fear, Something else was becoming clear too. Something that felt uncomfortably like the truth. He grabbed a root protruding from the edge and lowered himself over the side. The first 5 feet were manageable. His Italian shoes slipped on the wet earth, but he found footholds in the exposed roots and rocks. Then the slope steepened, and his left foot went out from under him, and he slid 8 feet down on his back, the mud soaking through his suit jacket, thorns tearing at his hands. He bit back a scream, tasted blood where he had bitten his tongue, kept going. Above him, Cora watched from the edge of the alley, Ghost's arm around her shoulders. She should have felt satisfaction. She should have felt vindication. Instead, she felt something she did not expect. Pity. Not forgiveness. Not even close. But something adjacent to it. Something that recognized the human being underneath the monster. A 25-year-old man crawling through mud because he had never learned how to be decent, because nobody had ever made him face the consequences of his cruelty, because the system that created him had also failed him in ways he probably did not even understand. 10 feet down. 15. Logan's shirt tore on a piece of exposed rebar. A gash opened across his forearm, shallow but bloody, and the pain shot through his body like electricity. He kept going. His hands were black with mud. One shoe had come off, sucked away by the muck. His suit, his $1,000 Italian suit, was destroyed. 20 minutes passed, or maybe it was an hour. Time had lost its meaning in the darkness of that ditch. Logan crawled on his hands and knees through standing water that smelled like something had died in it. His fingers searched through mud and garbage, feeling for something smooth, something metallic, something that did not belong in this place any more than he did, and then he felt it. Cold metal against his fingertips, smooth and heavy. He pulled it from the mud and held it up to the faint light. Silver beneath the grime, caked with dirt, but unmistakable. He knew what the engraving said without needing to read it. He could feel the wings of the skull under his thumb, the letters pressed into the metal like a promise that refused to be buried. Logan held the lighter in his muddy hand, and something happened to him that he did not have a name for. Not crying exactly, though tears were streaming down his face. Not understanding exactly, though something was shifting inside him like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of a continent. Something between grief and recognition. The realization that this object, this small piece of metal, meant more to Cora Ryder than everything Logan had ever owned combined. And he had thrown it away like trash, because she was easy, because nobody stopped him, because he could. The climb back up took twice as long. His muscles screamed. His torn hands slipped on every root and rock. 3 times he fell backwards, sliding down into the muck, before clawing his way up again. By the time he pulled himself over the edge and collapsed on solid ground, he looked like something that had crawled out of a swamp, which in a way he had. Ghost walked toward him slowly. Logan tried to stand, but his legs would not hold him, so he stayed on his knees. The parallel to what had happened in the diner, to what he had demanded of Cora, was not lost on anyone. He held out the lighter with both hands. Mud dripped from his fingers onto the pavement. Ghost took it carefully. He held it up to the streetlight, turning it over in his scarred hands, examining it the way a man examines something precious that has been returned from the dead. He wiped the mud away with his handkerchief, revealing the silver surface beneath. Then he opened it. The flame sparked to life with a familiar click, bright and steady, burning clean despite the mud and the water and the dark. "You found it," Ghost said quietly. "I am sorry. Logan's voice was wrecked. Torn apart and reassembled wrong every word, coming out raw and bleeding. I am sorry for everything. The lighter, the tips, the way I treated her, all of it. I did not understand. I did not know what it meant. No, you did not. But now you do. Ghost closed the lighter. He looked down at the broken young man kneeling in the mud, and he did something that nobody in that parking lot expected. He reached down and helped Logan to his feet. The old biker pulled his handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the mud from Logan's face. The gesture was gentle, almost fatherly, and it stunned every person watching. 200 bikers who had come prepared for war watched their president tend to the enemy like a wounded child. This is not about humiliation, Ghost said quietly. Humiliation is what you did to my granddaughter. This is about understanding, about learning what it costs to take something from someone who has nothing left. Ghost handed the lighter to Cora. She took it with both hands, her fingers trembling. The silver was warm from Ghost's palm. She turned it over, feeling the familiar weight, the grooves of the engraving worn smooth by decades of being held. Then she looked at Logan, at the mud caking his ruined suit, at the blood on his hands, at the tears cutting channels through the dirt on his face. She did not say anything. There were no words for this moment, no script that covered the territory between hatred and something else, something she could not yet name. Ghost put his arm around Cora's shoulders. Come on, baby girl. Let us go home. They turned and walked toward the truck. Behind them, 200 engines began to fire one after another, the sound building like a symphony of thunder until the entire block vibrated with it. Windows rattled, car alarms triggered. The night itself seemed to shake. But Ghost and Cora walked through it like they were walking through silence. They were almost to the truck when it happened. Ghost's left hand, the one that had been trembling all night, suddenly clenched into a fist. His step faltered. Just a stutter, a half-second interruption in his stride that anyone else would have missed. But Cora was not anyone else. She had been watching her grandfather's health with the vigilance of a woman who had already lost everyone she loved and could not afford to lose one more. Grandpa. I am fine. Ghost's voice was tight. Just tired. Long night. But his face had gone gray. Not the gray of exhaustion or cold. The gray of something mechanical, failing, something internal, shutting down. Cora had seen that color before in the doctor's office 3 weeks ago, on a chart that showed her grandfather's heart function declining month by month like a countdown to something she refused to think about. They reached the truck. Ghost climbed into the passenger seat, his movements careful and controlled. But Cora saw the way his hand gripped the door handle, the way his jaw clenched against something he was not willing to name. She drove home in silence. Ghost leaned his head against the window. His eyes closed, his breathing shallow. The lighter sat in Cora's pocket, warm and heavy, and recovered. But the victory felt hollow because the man who had recovered it, the man who had summoned an army and faced down a billionaire and taught a bully the meaning of consequences, was sitting beside her, looking like something essential had been spent. They pulled into the long driveway at 10:30. The guard dog came running, barking once before recognizing the truck and settling into happy circles around their feet. The farmhouse was dark, except for the porch light, a single bulb casting yellow light across the weathered boards. Ghost got out of the truck slowly. Too slowly. He stood for a moment with his hand on the door, steadying himself, and Cora came around to his side, and took his arm without asking, without commenting, without doing anything that would force him to acknowledge what they both knew. They made it to the porch. Ghost sat down in his rocking chair, the one with the worn cushion that held the shape of his body. Cora brought him water. He drank half of it and set it down. You did good tonight, baby girl. Ghost's voice was quieter than usual, thinner. Took courage to make that call. I should have called you months ago. Maybe. But you were trying to handle it yourself. That takes courage too. Different kind, but courage all the same. They sat in the darkness, grandfather and granddaughter listening to the crickets and the distant sound of the last motorcycles heading home. The night was cold, but neither of them moved to go inside. Some moments need open air. Grandpa, how bad is it? Your heart. Ghost was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, the pretending was gone. The armor was off. He was just an old man sitting on his porch, telling his granddaughter the truth. Bad enough that tonight probably took a year off whatever I have got left. But I would do it again tomorrow. I would do it 100 times. No amount of heartbeats is worth watching you suffer. Cora pressed her face against his shoulder and cried. Not the silent tears she had perfected over 2 years of suffering. Real crying. The ugly heaving kind that comes from the deepest parts of grief. Crying for her parents. Crying for her grandfather's failing heart. Crying for herself and all the nights she had swallowed pain instead of asking for help. Ghost held her. His scarred hands, the hands that had built an empire and terrified a generation, held his granddaughter as gently as they had once held his newborn son. We are going to be all right, baby girl. We are riders. We do not quit. They went inside. Cora made Ghost take his medication, watched him swallow the pills with the focus of a woman counting something precious. Then she helped him to his bedroom, a process that would have been humiliating for a proud man if the person helping had been anyone other than Cora. She sat on the edge of his bed while he settled in, pulling the quilt up to his chest. There is something I need to tell you, Ghost said. Something I have been holding on to for a while. What? Your father wrote you a letter before the accident. He gave it to me and said to give it to you when the time was right. I have been waiting 4 years for the right time. Cora's breath caught. A letter from her father. New words from a dead man. The possibility made her chest ache with a pain she thought she had outgrown. Not tonight, Ghost said. Tonight we rest. But soon, baby girl. Soon. He closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. Cora sat beside him for a long time, watching the rise and fall of his chest, counting each breath like a prayer. Then she went to her own room and lay on her bed in the darkness, the lighter on the nightstand, the moonlight catching the silver. She did not sleep. She lay there and thought about what tomorrow would bring now that she had no job, a sick grandfather, and a town that had just witnessed the most dramatic event in its recent memory. Tomorrow came at 6:15 in the morning with the sound of the phone ringing. Cora stumbled out of bed, her body stiff with exhaustion, and picked up the ancient landline in the hallway. Miss Ryder. The voice on the other end was deep and unfamiliar. My name is Dr. Coleman at Redwood Valley Medical. I need you to bring your grandfather in this morning. We received his latest blood work, and there are some results we need to discuss in person. Discuss what? What kind of results? I would rather not go into detail over the phone. Can you come in at 9? Cora looked down the hallway at Ghost's closed bedroom door. The sound of his breathing, steady but labored, carried through the wood. We will be there. The drive to the medical center was quiet. Ghost sat in the passenger seat, wearing his cleanest flannel and his reading glasses, which he only put on when he wanted to look respectable. He did not ask why the doctor wanted to see them. He already knew. Dr. Coleman was a tall man with kind eyes and the careful gentleness of a man who spent his career delivering bad news. He sat behind his desk with Ghost's file open in front of him, a file that had grown considerably thicker over the past year. Mr. Ryder, your ejection fraction has dropped to 28%. For reference, normal is 55 to 70. Below 35 is considered severe heart failure. The words hung in the air of the small office like smoke. What does that mean in plain language, Doc? Ghost's voice was steady. No fear, no surprise, just a man hearing confirmation of something he had already suspected. It means your heart is not pumping enough blood to sustain your body long term. You need surgery, a valve replacement, possibly a bypass. Without intervention, we are looking at 6 to 12 months before. Before what? Cora's voice was sharp. Before what, doctor? Dr. Coleman looked at her with those kind eyes. Before your grandfather's heart can no longer function on its own. The room contracted. The walls pressed inward. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. Cora gripped the arms of her chair so tightly, her knuckles went white. How much? She heard herself ask the question from a great distance, as if someone else were speaking through her mouth. The surgery itself, including hospital stay and rehabilitation, is approximately $180,000. Your grandfather's insurance will cover a portion, but given the plan he is on, his out-of-pocket responsibility would be somewhere in the range of $120,000. Cora had $247 in her bank account. She had no job. She had no savings. She had nothing except a lighter and a grandfather and a farmhouse that was mortgaged to the roof. Ghost reached over and took her hand. His grip was strong, stronger than it should have been for a man whose heart was failing. We will figure it out, baby girl. We always do. But Cora could not answer because she was doing the math, the terrible, impossible math, and every equation came up the same way. There was no figuring it out. There was no path through these numbers that did not end with her grandfather dying. They drove home in silence. Ghost went to the garage and started working on the Panhead, the 1967 Harley that had been in pieces for 3 years, the one that belonged to his old brother Tommy Chains Morrison. He worked slowly, methodically, his scarred hands moving with the precision of 50 years of practice. Cora knew he was not really working on the bike. He was thinking, processing, preparing for something. She sat on the porch and stared at the driveway and tried to imagine a world without her grandfather in it. She could not. The image would not form. It was like trying to imagine a sky without air. 3 days passed. Cora applied for jobs at every business in Redwood Valley. The grocery store, the gas station, the hardware store, the feed supply. Every single one turned her down. Not because she was unqualified, but because word had traveled. The girl who brought 200 bikers to town, the granddaughter of Ghost Rider. Hiring her meant risk. Hiring her meant potentially angering the Mercers, or attracting attention, or getting involved in something that was above everyone's pay grade. Redwood Valley was a small town, and small towns have long memories and short courage. On the fourth night, Cora was sitting in the kitchen, doing math on the back of an envelope when there was a knock at the front door. Not a hard knock, not a demanding knock. A careful knock, almost hesitant, from someone who was not sure they should be there. Cora opened the door and found Ashley Dixon standing on her porch. The woman looked different from the last time Cora had seen her. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of the designer outfits she usually wore like armor. She looked smaller without all of it. Younger, more human. Can I come in? Ashley's voice was barely above a whisper. I know you have no reason to let me, but I need to tell you something. And it could not wait. Cora stood in the doorway for a long moment, every instinct telling her to close the door. This was the woman who had laughed while Cora begged, who had told Logan to make her get on her knees, who had filmed the humiliation and posted it online. But something in Ashley's eyes stopped her. Something Cora recognized because she had seen it in her own mirror for 18 months. Fear. Real fear. The kind that lives in your bones and tells you that the person who is supposed to love you is the most dangerous person in your life. 5 minutes, Cora said. Then you leave. They sat at the kitchen table. Ashley's hands were shaking. She wrapped them around the coffee mug Cora offered, not drinking, just holding, using the warmth as an anchor. Logan hits me. The words came out flat and rapid, like ripping off a bandage. He has been hitting me for 2 years. Not where anyone can see. Never the face. Always the ribs, the arms, the back. Places that clothes cover. Cora sat very still. And it is not just me. Ashley reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive. She placed it on the table between them, a tiny black rectangle that looked harmless enough to be a piece of stationery. He has done this to other women. Employees at Mercer Construction, waitresses at other restaurants, women who work for his father's company. He targets women who cannot fight back, women who need their jobs, women who are alone. Cora stared at the USB drive. What is on there? Emails, texts, recordings. 2 of the women filed internal complaints with Mercer Construction's HR department. Both complaints were buried. Both women were fired within a month. One of them moved out of state. Ashley's voice was steady now, the way voices get when the person speaking has passed through fear and come out the other side into something harder. I have been collecting evidence for 6 months, copying files from Logan's laptop when he was asleep, saving messages he thought he had deleted. I was building a case, but I did not know what to do with it. I did not have anyone to give it to. Why me? Why are you giving this to me? Because you are the only person in this town who ever stood up to him. Ashley met Cora's eyes. Everyone else looks away. Everyone else stays quiet. You called your grandfather, and you brought the whole world down on his head. I watched it happen from the bathroom window, and I thought, if she can do that, maybe I can do something too. Cora looked at the USB drive for a long time. Then she looked at Ashley. Are you safe? Right now? Tonight? I broke up with him yesterday. Ashley's laugh was bitter and thin. He does not know about the drive. If he finds out, I do not know what he will do. Do you have somewhere to go? My sister in Portland. I am leaving tomorrow morning. I just needed to give you this first. Because what he did to you was wrong, and what I did laughing along, filming it, standing there, while he destroyed you, that was just as wrong. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I am sorry and that I am trying to make it right. Ashley stood up and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the knob. There is one more thing. Richard Mercer knows about his son's behavior. He has known for years. He has been paying off complaints and bearing evidence since Logan was in college. If you want to take them down, really take them down, that drive has everything you need. She left. Cora sat at the kitchen table, staring at the USB drive until the coffee went cold in her hands. Ghost appeared in the doorway. He had been listening. Of course, he had been listening. The man heard everything. That changes things, Ghost said quietly. Yeah, it does. What are you going to do with it? I do not know yet. Cora picked up the drive and turned it over in her fingers. But I know what I am not going to do. I am not going to use it for revenge. And I am not going to use it to destroy anyone. Ghost studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Your mother will be proud of you, baby girl. 2 days later, on a Wednesday evening at 9:45, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Richard Mercer. He stood on the porch in the cold. No suit jacket, no briefcase, no armor of wealth and status. Just a man in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like he had aged 10 years in a week. Miss Ryder, may I speak with you and your grandfather? Ghost came to the door. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Old adversaries taking the measure of what remained. Come in, Ghost said, before you catch your death. They sat in the living room, Richard on the couch, Ghost in his recliner, Cora in the rocking chair by the window. The room was small and worn, the furniture old, the carpet thin. It was the home of people who had worked hard for everything they had, which was not much. Richard spoke first. I know about the medical bills. I know your grandfather needs surgery. $180,000. Insurance covers 60. You need 120. How do you know that? Cora said. Small town Miss Ryder. People talk. And I have been making inquiries, not to intrude, to understand what my family owes yours. You do not owe us anything, Ghost said. We both know that is not true. Richard leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. My son terrorized your granddaughter for 18 months. He threw away an irreplaceable family heirloom. He cost her job. He used my name, my company, my money as a weapon against a young woman who had done absolutely nothing to deserve it. That is a debt, Mr. Ryder, a real one. So you are here to write a check. Ghost's voice was flat. I am here to do the right thing. For the first time in a very long time, I am trying to do the right thing. Richard's voice cracked on the last word. Not for business. Not for reputation. Because I have a son who hurts women, and I have been paying his way out of consequences for years instead of making him face them. And that makes me worse than he is. The room was quiet. The old clock on the mantel ticked. The guard dog sighed in his sleep by the door. Cora spoke. I do not want your money, Mr. Mercer. Richard looked at her. Confusion and something like respect crossing his face. But I will make you a deal. Cora's voice was steady. The steadiest it had been in 2 years. You pay for my grandfather's surgery. Every penny. And, in return, I will not use what I have against your son and your company at the town council meeting next month. What do you have? Richard's voice went sharp. Enough! Cora met his eyes without flinching. Enough to make sure Logan faces real consequences. enough to make sure your company's history of silencing women becomes very, very public. I am not threatening you, Mr. Mercer. I am giving you the same thing my grandfather gave your son last week, a chance to fix what is broken. Richard sat back. His face went through a series of calculations, the same rapid math his son had done in the diner parking lot, the same weighing of costs and consequences that had defined his entire career. But underneath the math, something else was happening. Something that looked almost like relief. The relief of a man who had been carrying a secret so long that the weight of it had become invisible until someone offered to help him set it down. You have a deal, Miss Ryder. But I have one condition of my own. What? When you speak at that meeting, and I know you will speak, I want to be there, not to stop you, not to interfere, to listen. Because I think it is time someone in my family started listening to the people we have been hurting. Cora looked at Ghost. The old man's blue eyes were unreadable, but the faintest trace of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. We have a deal, Cora said. Richard stood. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. My personal number. Call me when you have the surgery scheduled. I will handle everything directly. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Your grandfather is a remarkable man, Miss Ryder, and from what I have seen this week, so are you. Then he was gone, his Mercedes disappearing down the driveway, tail lights fading into the October dark. Ghost sat in his recliner for a long time after the door closed. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Cora had heard it in years. You just out-negotiated a $300 million man-baby girl. I learned from the best. Ghost laughed. A real laugh, warm and full, the kind that came from somewhere deep in his chest, where his failing heart still beat strong enough to hold all the love he had left. Come here, he said. And he opened his arms, and Cora went to him, and for a moment, the world was small enough to fit inside an old man's embrace. Tomorrow, there would be surgery to schedule, and speeches to write, and a town to change. Tomorrow, there would be hard conversations, and harder choices, and the constant drumbeat of consequences, catching up with the people who thought they were above them. But tonight, in a small farmhouse at the end of Crabtree Road, a grandfather held his granddaughter, and the lighter sat on the mantel, and the clock ticked, and the dog slept, and everything was for one quiet moment exactly as it should be. The surgery was scheduled for a Monday morning in November. Cora drove Ghost to Redwood Valley Medical at 5:30 in the morning, the sky still dark, the roads empty, the headlights of the old Ford, cutting through fog so thick it felt like driving through cotton. Ghost sat in the passenger seat, wearing his cleanest jeans and a flannel shirt that Cora had ironed the night before. He had shaved for the first time in a week. His white hair was pulled back in his usual ponytail, neat and precise. He looked like a man preparing for something important, which he was. He was preparing to let strangers cut open his chest and repair a heart that had been beating for 73 years without asking permission to stop. You do not have to stay, Ghost said as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. Could be hours. You should go home. Get some rest. I am not leaving. Cora, you have been up since 4. I am not leaving Grandpa. You can argue with me, or you can save your energy for the surgery. Your choice. Ghost looked at her for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. You sound just like your grandmother. Stubborn as a mule, and twice as loud about it. Good. She sounds like my kind of woman. She was the best kind of woman. Ghost's voice went soft. She would have loved you, baby girl. would have spoiled you rotten and taught you everything I was too thick headed to learn myself. They walked into the hospital together, Cora holding Ghost's arm. Not because he needed the support, though he did, because she needed to touch him to feel the solid reality of his body beside hers, to remind herself that he was still here. The pre op room was cold and fluorescent and smelled like antiseptic. A nurse named Donna, with kind eyes and steady hands, helped Ghost change into a hospital gown. He looked smaller in it, diminished. The leather and denim were his armor, and without them, he was just an old man with a bad heart and thin arms, and the vulnerability of someone who had spent his entire life being strong and was now being asked to be still. Cora sat beside his bed and held his hand. I have something for you, Ghost said. He reached under his pillow where he had hidden it before the nurse came in. A worn envelope, yellowed with age, the edges soft from years of being handled and put away and handled again. Cora took it. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she recognized instantly, even though she had not seen it in 4 years. Her father's handwriting. Careful and precise, the letters formed with the deliberation of a man who wanted every word to count. Dad told me to give it to you when the time was right, Ghost said. I have been carrying it for 4 years waiting, and I figure if there was ever a right time, it is now, before they wheel me in there and start poking around in my chest. Cora held the envelope against her heart. She did not open it. Not yet. Some things need to be held before they can be read. The surgical team arrived at 7:15. Dr. Hartwell, the cardiac surgeon, with 2 assistants, and an anesthesiologist with a calm voice and gentle hands. They explained the procedure in terms that sounded reassuring but meant nothing. Valve replacement, bypass graft, estimated 4 hours. Full recovery in 12 to 16 weeks. Ghost listened with the expression of a man who had sat through briefings before. Patient, attentive, already calculating the odds. One thing Ghost said to Dr. Hartwell: if something goes wrong in there, you do not let my granddaughter see me until I am cleaned up. She has seen enough ugly in her life. She does not need to see me looking like leftovers. Nothing is going to go wrong, Mr. Ryder. I did not say it would. I said if. Old men plan for if. It is what keeps us old. They wheeled him away at 7:30. Cora stood in the hallway and watched the gurney disappear through the double doors, Ghost's white ponytail the last thing visible before the doors swung shut. Then she was alone. She sat down in the waiting room, a beige rectangle with plastic chairs and a television mounted to the wall, playing morning news that nobody was watching. She held the envelope in both hands and stared at it for 15 minutes before she finally slid her finger under the seal and pulled out 2 pages of lined paper covered in her father's handwriting. Baby girl. If you are reading this, it means I did not make it home. I am sorry. I am sorry for every birthday I am going to miss, every graduation, every first date, every heartbreak I will not be there to help you through. I am sorry I will not get to walk you down the aisle or hold your children or grow old enough to embarrass you in front of your friends. But I am not sorry for who you are, because you, Cora, are the best thing I ever did. Better than any career or accomplishment or award. You are my proof that I got something right in this world. Your grandfather is going to tell you that I made mistakes. He is right. I did. I grew up angry, baby girl. Angry at the world for being hard, and at people for being cruel, and at myself for not being strong enough to stop any of it. That anger ate me alive for a long time. It turned me into someone I did not recognize, someone who hurt people because he did not know how to stop hurting. Your mother saved me from that. She saw something in me that I could not see in myself, something worth loving, something worth saving. And she did not quit until she proved it to me. She made me kind Cora, not soft, kind. There is a difference, and it is the most important difference in the world. So here is what I need you to know. The world is going to try to make you hard. People are going to hurt you. They are going to take things from you and laugh about it and tell you that you deserve it. And every single time that happens, you're going to have a choice. You can let the pain make you cruel, or you can let it make you kind. Choose kind, baby girl. Every time, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Because kindness is not weakness. It is easy to be mean. Any coward can be mean. But it takes real courage to look at someone who has hurt you and choose not to hurt them back. Take care of Ghost. He is a tough old man, but he loves harder than anyone I've ever known. And losing people breaks him in ways he will never admit. Take care of yourself and take care of that lighter. It has been in our family longer than any of us, and it will be here long after we are gone. It is our heart, Cora. Guard it. I love you more than I can say, more than words, more than letters on a page. Be brave, be kind, be you. Dad. Cora read the letter 3 times. She read it until the words blurred and her tears fell onto the paper, leaving small, dark circles on the lined pages. She read it until she could hear her father's voice, speaking the words, that quiet, steady voice. She had been forgetting a little more each year. The voice that used to read her bedtime stories and sing off key in the truck and tell her she was the most important person in the entire universe. Then she folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope and placed it in the pocket of her jacket next to the lighter. 4 hours passed, then 5, then 6. At 1:45 in the afternoon, Dr. Hartwell came through the double doors. His surgical cap was off. His face was tired, but his eyes were clear. Surgery went well, Miss Ryder. The valve replacement was successful, and the bypass graft is holding. Your grandfather is in recovery. He is stable. Cora stood up so fast the plastic chair skidded backward across the linoleum. Can I see him? He is sedated, but yes, you can sit with him. Ghost looked small in the hospital bed. Smaller than Cora had ever seen him. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped and hummed and displayed numbers that meant he was alive. His white hair was loose spread across the pillow. His face was pale. His hands, those scarred, powerful hands that had built an empire and held a granddaughter and gripped a lighter through 60 years of living, lay still on the blanket. Cora pulled a chair to his bedside and sat down. She took his hand. It was warm. She held it, and she did not let go. At 3:15, Ghost opened his eyes. He blinked at the ceiling, at the machines, at the fluorescent lights. Then his head turned slowly, and he saw Cora, and his expression changed. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter and deeper than a smile. Recognition. The look of a man who has woken up in a strange place and found the one thing that makes it feel like home. Still here, he whispered. His voice was thin as paper. Still here, Grandpa. both of us. Ghost closed his eyes again. His hand tightened around hers, just barely, just enough. Good, he breathed. That is good. Recovery was slow. Ghost stayed in the hospital for 8 days, each one a small battle between his body's need to heal and his mind's need to be anywhere else. He complained about the food. He complained about the television. He complained about the nurses who kept waking him up to check his vital signs. Though Cora noticed he was always polite about it, always said thank you, always asked about their families, and remembered their names. On the third day, a package arrived at the hospital room. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $120,000 and a note written on plain white paper. A deal is a deal. The surgery is covered. No strings. Richard Mercer. Cora stared at the check for a long time. $120,000. More money than she had ever seen. More money than she would make in 5 years of waitressing. Enough to save her grandfather's life. Written by a man whose son had tried to destroy hers. The world was strange and cruel, and sometimes unexpectedly generous. On the fifth day, Ghost was well enough to sit up in bed and eat solid food. Cora brought him his favorite, a peanut butter sandwich on wheat bread, the same lunch she had eaten every day at the diner, because it was cheap and filling, and because her grandfather had taught her that simple food made with love was better than anything a restaurant could serve. Ghost ate the sandwich slowly, savoring each bite. Then he looked at Cora with those blue eyes that had lost none of their sharpness despite the surgery and the sedation and the slow, painful process of becoming mortal. The town council meeting is in 2 weeks, he said. I know. You still planning to speak? Yes. What are you going to say? Cora was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts the way she organized her section at the diner. Methodically, efficiently making sure everything was in its proper place. I am going to tell them the truth about what happened to me, about what happened to the other women Logan hurt, about how the system allowed it, about how people looked away because it was easier than standing up. And Logan. What about him? Cora thought about the USB drive sitting in the drawer of her nightstand at home, the emails, the texts, the recordings, enough evidence to put Logan Mercer in prison, or at the very least destroy his family's reputation beyond repair. She thought about her father's letter. Be brave. Be kind. Be you. I am not going to destroy him, Grandpa. I am going to give him a chance to destroy himself or save himself. That is his choice, not mine. Ghost nodded slowly. Your father would have said exactly that. On the 8th day, Ghost came home. Cora drove slowly, avoiding every pothole, every bump, every imperfection in the road that might jar his healing chest. The guard dog went crazy when they pulled into the driveway, barking and spinning, and nearly knocking Ghost over when he climbed out of the truck. Easy, boy. Ghost steadied himself against the door. I am held together with stitches and stubbornness right now. Give me a week before you try to kill me with affection. The house was clean. Cora had spent the previous afternoon scrubbing every surface, washing every sheet, making sure everything was ready for his return. She had even put fresh flowers on the kitchen table, wildflowers from the field behind the garage, yellow and purple and white, the colors of autumn. Ghost stood in the doorway and looked at the flowers, and something moved across his face that Cora had never seen before. Not sadness exactly, not joy. Something between the two. Something that belonged to a man who had lived long enough to understand that beauty and pain were not opposites, but partners, two halves of the same human experience. Your grandmother used to put flowers on that table, he said quietly. Every Sunday, rain or shine, she said a house without flowers was just a building. 2 weeks of recovery. Cora barely left the house. She cooked Ghost's meals, administered his medication, helped him with the exercises the physical therapist had prescribed. Slow walks around the property, gentle stretching, deep breathing, the monotonous, repetitive work that builds something invisible, the slow reconstruction of a body that had been opened and repaired and sealed back together. In the evenings, they worked on the panhead. Ghost could not do much physically, but he directed Cora with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Turn that bolt a quarter turn. No, the other way. Feel how it seats. Do not force it. Let the metal tell you what it wants. The motorcycle took shape under Cora's hands. Chrome and black paint emerging from 43 years of patient waiting. Tommy Chains Morrison's legacy, rebuilt by a girl who had never turned a wrench before her grandfather started teaching her. You know who Tommy was? Ghost said one evening as Cora adjusted the carburetor. You told me. Your old riding partner died in a crash in '74. He was more than that. Ghost settled deeper into his chair, his voice taking on the slow, rolling rhythm of a man telling a story he had been saving for the right audience. Tommy was the first person to ride with me when I started the club. Nobody else believed in what I was building. They thought I was crazy. A kid from nowhere trying to create a brotherhood from nothing. But Tommy showed up on the first day with a stolen Harley and a six-pack and said, "Where are we going, brother?" And that was that. What happened to him? Same thing that happens to all of us eventually. The road took him, went around a curve too fast on Highway 1, just north of Big Sur. Beautiful day, clear sky, perfect road. He just went too fast. Ghost was quiet for a moment. He left me the bike in his will. Only thing he owned that was worth anything. I have been meaning to rebuild it for 43 years. Never had the right person to build it with. Until now. Until now. Cora tightened the final bolt on the carburetor and stepped back. The engine block gleamed under the garage lights, every piece in its place, every connection secure. She is done, Grandpa. Ghost stood up slowly, using the workbench for support, and walked to the motorcycle. He ran his hand along the gas tank, feeling the smooth paint, the chrome trim, the perfect curves of a machine that had been born in 1967 and was now finally ready to live again. She is yours, he said. What? The bike. She is yours. When you get your motorcycle license, she is yours. Tommy would have wanted that. A rider on his machine. A woman at that. He would have loved that. Cora stared at the panhead. 43 years of waiting. 50 years of brotherhood. 3 generations of a family that had been broken and rebuilt and broken again and rebuilt again. Just like this engine, just like this bike, just like the lighter in her pocket that had survived mud and darkness and the carelessness of cruel men. Thank you, Grandpa. I do not know what to say. Know what? Say, you will ride it like you mean it, and say, you will never let anyone make you feel small again. Because you, baby girl, are the biggest thing in my world. Always have been. The town council meeting fell on a Thursday evening in December. Cold and clear, the stars sharp as needles above Redwood Valley. Cora drove Ghost to the district office at 6:30, 30 minutes early, because she wanted to sit in the auditorium and breathe before the room filled with people. Ghost walked in slowly, still recovering, still careful with his movements. He wore his leather cut over a clean white shirt. The patches gleamed under the fluorescent lights. President. Original member. 1955. He was not trying to intimidate anyone. He was simply wearing his identity the way other men wore ties or badges or class rings. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. Take. By 6:50, the auditorium was full. More than full. People stood along the walls and in the doorways. Business owners, retirees, farm workers, mechanics, nurses. The entire town had come drawn by the gravity of what had happened at Miller's Diner 7 weeks ago and what might happen tonight. Richard Mercer sat in the second row. He had come alone. No lawyers, no advisors, no entourage. Just a man in a quiet gray suit, sitting with his hands folded in his lap, waiting. Logan Mercer was not there, or rather, he was not visible. Cora scanned the room twice without finding him and assumed he had chosen not to come. The meeting opened at 7 sharp. The board president, a retired school superintendent named Walter Ford, called the room to order and moved through 45 minutes of routine business. Budget allocations, infrastructure updates, a zoning dispute on the east side of town, the bureaucratic machinery of small town governance grinding through its gears while 200 people waited for the real agenda to begin. At 7:48, Ford opened public comment. We have several speakers signed up tonight. Each person will have 5 minutes. Please state your name for the record. Cora stood up. Her legs felt strange beneath her, disconnected from her body, operating on instructions from somewhere deeper than her conscious mind. She walked to the microphone at the front of the auditorium and looked out at 200 faces. She thought about her father's letter. Be brave, be kind, be you. She thought about Ghost in his hospital bed, holding her hand, whispering, still here. She thought about the lighter in her pocket, heavy and familiar, carrying its years the way she carried hers. And then she spoke. My name is Cora Ryder. I am 22 years old. I live on Crabtree Road with my grandfather. For 2 years, I worked as a waitress at Miller's Diner on Main Street. And for 18 of those months, I was harassed, humiliated, and tormented by a man who knew that I could not fight back because I needed my job to survive. The room was silent, not the comfortable silence of agreement, the uncomfortable silence of people being forced to look at something they had been choosing not to see. I am not here to name that man. Most of you already know who he is, and I am not here to destroy him or his family or his business. I am here because what happened to me is not unique. It is not special. It is not unusual. It is the everyday experience of working women in this town and in every town like it across this country. Women who smile while they are being degraded because the alternative is losing their income. Women who go home and cry in their trucks because they cannot cry in front of their children. Women who swallow their dignity with their morning coffee because dignity does not pay the electricity bill. Cora paused. In the front row, Ghost sat perfectly still, his blue eyes locked on his granddaughter, his scarred hands resting on his knees. I reported what was happening to me. I reported it to my employer, who fired me to protect his lease. I reported it to friends who told me to keep my head down. I did not report it to the police because nothing that happened to me was technically illegal. Being cruel to a waitress is not a crime. Making someone beg on their knees for their own property is not a crime. Throwing a family heirloom into a drainage ditch is not a crime. But it should be. Not legally. Morally. It should be a crime against the basic contract we make with each other as human beings. The contract that says I will treat you with dignity, and you will treat me with dignity regardless of how much money is in our bank accounts. Someone in the back of the room was crying. Cora could hear it soft and muffled. The sound of someone recognizing their own story in someone else's words. 7 weeks ago, my grandfather did something about it. He made a phone call and 200 people came to stand with me. Not because they were angry, not because they wanted violence, because they understood something that this town has forgotten. That when someone hurts one of us, they hurt all of us. That the measure of a community is not how it treats its wealthiest members, but how it treats its most vulnerable. Cora looked directly at Richard Mercer. He met her eyes. He did not look away. I am not asking for punishment. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for change. Real change. The kind that starts with accountability and ends with a town that protects its working people the way it protects its property values. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the USB drive. She held it up so the room could see it. I have evidence. Documentation of a pattern of behavior that goes beyond what happened to me. Other women, other victims, other stories that have been buried and silenced and paid off. I could release this evidence tonight. I could give it to the media. I could use it to destroy a family and a company and feel justified in doing so. She paused again. The auditorium held its breath. But I am not going to do that. My father wrote me a letter before he died. He said something I did not understand until I was standing in a drainage ditch at midnight, watching a man search for what he had thrown away. He said, "Be brave, be kind, be you." Tonight, I am trying to be all three. Cora put the USB drive back in her pocket. So instead of releasing this evidence, I am going to hold on to it. Not as a weapon, as insurance. Insurance that the people responsible for hurting me and others will do the right thing going forward. Not because they are afraid of exposure, but because they have decided to be better. And if they do not decide to be better, then the evidence will speak for itself. She looked at the board members, at the town officials, at the faces of 200 people who had come to watch a young woman either save or destroy a powerful family. I am asking this council to establish a workers' protection ordinance. Something with teeth. Something that says no employer in Redwood Valley can fire an employee for reporting harassment. Something that says no landlord can use a lease as leverage to silence victims. Something that says this town values its people more than its real estate. Cora stepped back from the microphone. She had said what she came to say. Nothing more, nothing less. No theatrics, no tears. Just truth spoken plainly and clearly by a woman who had been taught that silence was survival and had learned that silence was actually slow death. The applause started slowly. A single pair of hands in the back row. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. Then the entire auditorium was on its feet, clapping and crying and looking at each other with the faces of people who have witnessed something they did not know they needed to see. And then a voice rose above the noise. "May I speak?" The room went quiet. Heads turned toward the back of the auditorium, toward a figure standing in the last row who had slipped in during Cora's testimony without anyone noticing. Logan Mercer walked down the center aisle. He moved slowly, deliberately, his hands visible at his sides, his face stripped of every mask he had ever worn. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a plain white t shirt and work boots that had actual dirt on them. He looked like a different person. Not better, not worse, just different. Like something had been removed and something else had been added, and the sum of the equation had changed. He reached the microphone. He did not look at Cora. He looked at the room. At the town he had terrorized with his father's money and his own cruelty. At the faces of people he had never bothered to see as human beings. My name is Logan Mercer. I am the man she is talking about, and everything she said is true. Richard Mercer closed his eyes. His hands tightened in his lap until the knuckles went white. For 18 months, I harassed a woman who had done nothing to me. I humiliated her. I threatened her employer. I stole something irreplaceable from her and threw it away for sport. I did it because I could. Because nobody stopped me. Because I had been raised to believe that money made me untouchable and that people without money were not really people at all. Logan's voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. One wrong vibration and it would snap. 7 weeks ago, Cora's grandfather showed me what accountability looks like. He made me crawl through a ditch to find what I had thrown away. And while I was down there, covered in mud, with thorns cutting my hands, I understood something for the first time in my life. I understood what it feels like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone else's decision, to want something desperately and not know if you will get it. He paused. The room was absolutely still. That is what Cora felt every single day. Every shift, every interaction, every moment, she had to smile at me and pretend everything was fine because her grandfather's medication depended on her tips. And I took that from her. Not just the lighter, her dignity, her safety, her peace of mind. I took things that no amount of money can replace. Logan looked at his father. Richard's eyes were open now, and they were wet. My father knew about my behavior. Not the specifics with Cora, but the pattern. Other women, other complaints. He paid to make them go away because protecting the company was more important than holding his son accountable. And I let him. Because it was easier to keep being a monster when someone was cleaning up after you. Logan turned back to the room. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I am telling you the truth because Cora gave me a chance to tell it myself instead of having it exposed against my will. She could have destroyed me tonight. She chose not to. That is the kind of strength I never had and am only beginning to understand. He stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, he stood there exposed and diminished and more human than anyone in that room had ever seen him. Then he walked back up the aisle and out the door without looking at anyone. In the fifth row, Tyler Briggs sat with his head bowed, his hands clasped between his knees. He had not spoken to Logan in 3 weeks. He did not need to. Some silences say everything. Ashley Dixon was not in the room. She was in Portland, safe at her sister's house, watching the meeting live stream on her phone. When Logan finished speaking, she closed the app and cried for 20 minutes. Then she called Cora and said 2 words. Thank you. The auditorium erupted. Board members conferred in urgent whispers. Reporters from the county newspaper were scribbling furiously. Parents turned to each other with expressions that mixed outrage and admiration and the confusion that comes from watching your assumptions about power and weakness get turned inside out. Richard Mercer stood up. He did not go to the microphone. He walked to where Ghost and Cora sat in the front row. He stood in front of the old biker and the young waitress, and he did not speak for a long moment. His face was working muscles pulling against each other, the architecture of control collapsing one beam at a time. Then Richard Mercer, a man worth $300 million, who had not cried in public since he was a child, pressed his hand over his eyes and wept. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was barely audible. "I am sorry for my son. I am sorry for myself. I am sorry for every person my family has hurt." Ghost looked up at the broken billionaire. For a long moment, the two men regarded each other across a divide that money and leather and years of different choices had carved between them. Then Ghost extended his hand. Richard took it. The board voted unanimously that night to establish the Workers' Dignity Ordinance of Redwood Valley. Mandatory protections for employees reporting harassment, independent oversight of landlord-tenant disputes involving commercial properties, a community advocate position funded by the town budget. It was not perfect. No law is perfect, but it was a start. And in a town that had spent decades looking the other way, a start was everything. 3 months later, on a sunny morning in March, Cora walked into Miller's diner for the first time since the night she was fired. Marcus Ford stood behind the counter. He looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his hair had gone grayer at the temples. When he saw Cora, he set down the coffee pot and came around the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. "I do not know if you heard," Marcus said. "The diner was sold. Mercer Construction transferred the lease to a community trust. I own the building free and clear now. I heard. I want you to come back, not as a waitress, as a manager. So manager, actually. Equal say in how this place runs, including a policy I wrote up last week. Zero tolerance for customer harassment of staff. Anyone who mistreats my people gets banned for life. I do not care if they own the whole state." Cora looked around the diner. The same Formica countertops, the same vinyl booths, the same jukebox playing country songs from the 80s. But something was different. Something in the air, in the light, in the way the morning sun came through the windows and fell across the tables. It felt like possibility. "I will think about it," Cora said. And she meant it, not as a polite refusal, as a genuine consideration of a future she had not believed was available to her. She walked out of the diner and into the March sunshine. Ghost was waiting in the truck, the window down, his arm resting on the door. His color was better. His eyes were brighter. The surgery had given him back something that the years had been slowly taking away. Not youth exactly, but vitality. The energy of a man who has been told he might die and has decided to take that personally. "How did it go?" Ghost asked. "He offered me a job. You going to take it?" "Maybe. Probably. But not today. Today I have somewhere else to be." They drove out of town past the diner and the medical center and the district office where Cora had stood at a microphone and changed the trajectory of an entire community. They drove into the hills, following roads that got narrower and rougher the further they went from civilization. Ghost directed her with quiet instructions. "Left here, right at the fence post, straight past the old oak." They arrived at a clearing overlooking the valley. The same clearing Ghost had mentioned once, the place he had come after his son died. The place where he had screamed at God and the sky and the empty, indifferent universe. But today the universe did not feel indifferent. Today the sun was warm and the grass was green and somewhere in the trees, a bird was singing with the blind, stubborn optimism of something that has never been taught to be afraid. Ghost got out of the truck and walked to the edge of the clearing. Cora followed. Below them, Redwood Valley spread out like a map, the buildings small and neat, the roads connecting them like veins carrying blood to a heart. Your father used to come here, Ghost said. When things got hard, he would sit right where you were sitting and look at that view and try to remember that the world was bigger than his problems. Cora sat on the grass and looked out at the valley. The lighter was in her pocket. The letter was in her jacket. Both of them warm from her body heat. Both of them part of her now woven into the fabric of who she was becoming. I got something for you, Ghost said. He walked back to the truck and returned carrying something covered in a canvas tarp. He set it down in front of Cora and pulled the tarp away. A helmet, matte black, simple, clean, and next to it, a leather jacket. Not Ghost's jacket with its patches and history. A new jacket. Plain black leather, unadorned, unmarked. A blank page waiting to be written on. The panhead is ready, Ghost said. Been sitting in that garage waiting for you. Tommy's bike rebuilt by your hands. And now she needs a rider. I still do not have my license. Got you an appointment at the DMV next Tuesday? Ghost's eyes crinkled. But today on private property, I figured the law can look the other way. What do you say, baby girl? Ready to ride? They drove home. The panhead sat in the garage, gleaming chrome and black paint, 43 years of patience made physical. Cora put on the jacket, put on the helmet, swung her leg over the seat, and felt the machine settle beneath her, like a living thing recognizing its rider. Ghost climbed onto his Road King, moving carefully, still mindful of his healing chest. He started his engine. The familiar roar filled the garage, rattled the windows, sent the guard dog into ecstatic circles. Cora turned the key. The panhead coughed once, twice, then caught. The engine roared to life with a sound that was deeper and rawer than Ghost's Road King, the sound of a machine that had been sleeping for 4 decades and was finally awake. They rode out of the garage together, grandfather and granddaughter, onto the long private road that stretched behind their property. A straight shot of packed dirt and gravel, lined with old oaks, running for 2 miles before it hit the fence line. Cora opened the throttle. The wind hit her face, and she understood instantly and completely why her grandfather loved this life. Freedom. Not the abstract freedom of rights and laws and constitutions. The physical freedom of movement, of speed, of a machine responding to your body and your will and carrying you forward into whatever comes next. She rode beside Ghost, matching his pace, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The sun on her face, the engine between her legs, the lighter in her pocket, the letter over her heart. The old man riding beside her, his white ponytail streaming behind him like a banner, his scarred hands steady on the handlebars. His blue eyes squinting against the wind and the light and the sheer improbable beauty of being alive. When they reached the end of the road, they stopped, engines idling, dust settling around them. Ghost looked at his granddaughter. She looked back at him. Your daddy said the world needs more kind people. Ghost's voice was rough with wind and emotion, and Svendi, 3 years of living, he was right, and you baby girl are the proof. Cora smiled. Not the careful, practiced smile she had worn like armor at the diner. A real smile. The kind that comes from somewhere below the surface, from the place where pain and joy and love and loss all live together in the same complicated, beautiful, unfinished room. They turned their bikes around and rode back toward the house. Grandfather and granddaughter, two riders on two Harleys, the guard dog running alongside them, barking with pure, stupid joy. Behind them, the sun was setting over Redwood Valley, painting the sky in colors that no one had thought to name because some things are too beautiful for language. And ahead of them, the farmhouse waited with its warm lights and its kitchen table and its wildflowers and its worn leather couch and all the small, ordinary, sacred things that make a house a home. Logan Mercer left Redwood Valley 2 weeks later. He drove to Montana, where he spent 6 months working with a community rehabilitation program, building houses for people who had nothing. He did not come back the same person. Whether he came back a better one remained to be seen. But he came back quieter, and in Cora's experience, quiet was where change began. Because sometimes the quietest girl in the room is backed by people powerful enough to shake the entire world. And sometimes the strongest thing she can do is not tear that world apart, but rebuild it. One conversation, one truth, one act of stubborn mercy at a time. Cora Ryder had learned that the hard way, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure the next girl would not have to learn it alone. The engines faded into the evening. The dust settled. The dog barked one last time, and then was quiet. And, on the mantel of a farmhouse at the end of Crabtree Road, a silver Zippo lighter caught the last light of the day. Still burning, still bright, still here.